Oh man, it is a bad card this weekend. This Saturday night, your main event, you see it on the screen, Holm versus Mayra Bueno Silva. It's not good. I'll be straight up honest with you. It's not good. The card is not great. The main event, okay, in all fairness, it's not a horrible main event like we've seen worse. It's a fight where, honestly, if Holm wins, she will likely be next to the title, I think. I think they'll probably have her leap above Raquel Pennington for the World Championship if she does beat Mayra Bueno Silva here in a main event, because honestly, she's beat Raquel Pennington, and obviously it seems like Juliana Pena will be the other side of the equation for the Women's Bantamweight Championship, but it feels like it'll probably be Holm with the win here, or Raquel Pennington if Holly loses. So, in all fairness, it's a big main event in terms of title, contention and a big fight for the Women's Bantamweight division, but the rest of the card, there's a lot of fighters coming off of losses, and it's an interesting card. And before we get into the video, folks, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for some more UFC here on the channel. This video, I will warn you, is being recorded on July 5th, just because I'm taking off for vacation, so I'm not going to be able to, record this video before I usually post on Sunday afternoon. So this video is being recorded on Wednesday, so there's a warning to that. So if anything on the card changes, that's why. But again, this is being recorded on Wednesday, and here we go. And also, if you haven't yet, go check out the closer looks here on the channel. We post short films on MMA fighters 2 weeks ago. Was Abus Magomedov. Last week it was Dricus du Plessis. Very different videos than what I usually do on the channel. I think they're pretty good. I think they're well edited. Make sure to go check those out. There's links are down in the description down below if you haven't seen them yet. If you like these videos, you'll probably like those too. But we've got a 13 fight card this Saturday night from the UFC Apex. And honestly, if this is what UFC Apex cards are at this point, I'm okay with it. If Apex cards used for guys who maybe shouldn't be fighting in front of a crowd, or, in all fairness, guys who people don't want to pay to see, I'm okay with that. And the main event is, again, like a lower level fight, a fight that could be on a main card of a, like a co-main event of a fight night with the crowd, but they put it on the Apex instead just to get the headline spot. I'm okay with that. Like, many guys in this card, in all fairness, people aren't going to go out and pay for and buy a ticket to watch Austin Lingo fight. Now, they will, because people will pay to watch the UFC, but, it's fine. Like, you need these Apex cards every once in a while. If that's what the UFC is going to do, I'm okay with it. So, this is a very Apex-y card. And, again, this could probably sell very well in Portland, Oregon or something, like in a random city. But the UFC does it in the Apex. I'm fine with it. So, even though I don't like Apex cards, I think this is the type of card that can be in the Apex, except for Terrence McKinney should probably get out the Apex because he's a very entertaining fighter. Anyways, let's get into it, man. 13 fights here on this card. We will start off with our first fight being the returning Ashley Evans Smith taking on Aline Perez here in the Bantamweight division. Where do we get started for this one? Because Ashley Evans Smith, 6-5 professional record. No, by the way, I'm recording this on July 5th early morning, so if you hear anything going off in the background, it's fireworks because it's the 4th of July. But anyways, Ashley Evans Smith is back in the UFC. Well, she never left, but she just hasn't fought. Anyway, she's 3-5. She made her UFC debut, get this all the way back in 2014, but she holds a 3-5 record. She came into the UFC with a 3-0 record, but then dropped her first fight to Raquel Pennington, then lost to beat Marion Renaud, beat Veronica Macedo, who became Veronica Hardy, lost to Ketlen Vieira, lost to Sarah Morris, beat Bec Rawlings, and lost back-to-back fights to Andrea Lee and to Norma Dumont. She's now at 135 pounds again, as she fought once at 125 against Andrea Lee. But Ashley Evans Smith is back, and she'll be taking on Aline Perez, who is 7-2. And for Perez, again, it's been a mixed bag of results, I guess, outside the UFC. But in the UFC, one loss, it's the submission loss to Stephanie Yeager in Paris on that Gone to Ivasa card. Fight went deep into the second round, but Stephanie Yeager again eventually got that submission. First round controlled by Stephanie Yeager a lot. Second round more of the same. Yeager eventually gets that submission and finishes Perez. It's an interesting fight because honestly, when you look at the odds, again, we haven't featured -170 for Perez, +140 for Ashley Evans Smith. Again, though, what Ashley Evans Smith are we going to get? I don't know, because she hasn't been around in a while. What we did see out of her in the Norma Dumont fight, she gets dropped by Dumont in that fight in the third round. She gets 30-26 in that one. And given, Dumont, who we're going to talk about later on in this card, is a fighter who, I guess if they made a 145-pound weight class, would likely be fighting for the world championship. But again, they don't have a 145-pound weight class, so. But, she gets beat up by Andrea Lee. The winner, Rebecca Rawlings, is a back-and-forth fight in the feet, but again, Bec Rawlings is never the greatest UFC fighter anyway, so that's how that fight was won. She drops into Sarah Morris, where she gets armbarred in the first round, and then Ketlen Vieira beats her by unanimous decision. So, Aline Perez, again, got dominated in her first fight. We talked about it before her fight against Edgar in Paris. She hadn't really fought anybody outside the UFC. She fought Tamara's Vidal outside the promotion, who, again, Vidal now in the UFC with the victory over Ramona Pascual in her first fight. But again, you don't know what you're going to get at Perez because she really didn't fight anybody when she was fighting in local regional promotions in Argentina. I'm going to take her to win because I think she's still better than Ashley Evans-Smith or what Ashley Evans-Smith can possibly do at this point of her career. Again, Ashley Evans-Smith is 36 years old. Perez is a pretty sizable favorite on Tapology, 89% to 11% for Ashley Evans-Smith. I'm going to go with Aline Perez to pick up the victory. Actually, I need to pull up my predictions thing on Tapology while I do this. I'll take her by decision. Again, I'm not anticipating a finish at all. But yeah, I'll go with hesitantly. I mean, it's not like it's just a bad fight. That's all it is. It's a bad fight. Aline Perez is going to get the victory by decision. Next up on this card, we will have a big fight here between Alex Munoz, who is actually a favorite going into this fight, which I didn't think was actually going to happen ever. Alex Munoz being favored in the UFC, but he'll be taking on Carl Deaton III. For Carl Deaton, his first fight in the promotion was a loss to Joe Solecki earlier this year in 2023. For Alex Munoz, we haven't seen this guy in a while. He's been booked a couple times, but 0-2 in the promotion. He made his way onto the UFC by winning on Dana White looking for a fight. He got a contract fighting on a Hawaii card, I believe. And then he hasn't won in the UFC since. Obviously, he's 0-2. He's not fought since 2021. His last fight, though, did keep it competitive in a fight that he was definitely supposed to lose when he went out and fought Violent Bob Ross Luis Pena. He loses the fight by split decision, but honestly, it's a pretty solid showing for himself for Alexander Munoz. I think he loses the fight. I think the only round he does win is the second round, but he stays in the fight, and it's honestly not a horrible performance for him. He gets a couple takedowns in that fight in the first and the second round. It's not a horrible fight for Munoz. His first one in the UFC was a loss to Nasrat Haqparast. He just gets dominated in that fight, but that fight made sense because Haqparast should not be fighting entry-level type guys in the UFC, and when he does, he's going to do exactly that to him, 30-27 them. Then Munoz, I guess of note, fought Nick Newell on Contender Series. Nick Newell, obviously the fighter with only one, he's got a half arm, one arm basically. Nick Newell. Of course, Munoz beat him by unanimous decision. Now, his opponent's going to be Carl Deaton III, a guy who we saw in the PFL 2 years ago in 2021. He just fought one fight for them. He lost a fight by split decision to Alejandro Flores. Since then, he went on to Total Warrior Combat, beat the former UFC fighter and the Guitar Hero and Justin James. Then he went on to beat Antoine Blasingame after that by rear naked choke in the second round. Then got the shot into the UFC on short notice, where he went on and fought Joe Solecki. Solecki finishes him in the second round by submission. But Deaton was an interesting signing for the UFC. Again, 17-6 professional record. He's got a loss to Vince Murdoch back in 2017. The Ultimate Fighter's own Vince Murdoch, who went on to lose to a fighter who was 2-7 in his last fight. Deaton's got a fight in RFA back in 2014 where he lost. It was just an interesting signing because, again, Deaton wasn't seeing too much success. He was on back-to-back losses going into that Justin James fight where he did edge out the victory. But I just don't know what to get at Carl Deaton. Again, his one fight against Solecki, he didn't do anything. Immediately in the first round, he gets taken down and he gets held down. In the second round, Solecki goes in for the takedown again and then gets a submission again. Or gets a submission, and then, that's the end of the fight. So Deaton's first fight in the UFC, he was on his back for 10 minutes. And then for Alex Munoz, again, he's lost both of his fights in the UFC, but at least he was competitive against Luis Pena. So that's why I'm going to go with Alex Munoz to win the fight. How does he get it done? I think he probably wins a stand-up fight. Like, Deaton was billed going into the UFC. I remember they were talking about on the pre-fight show or during his walkout that, all right, Deaton's a good ground guy. I know it'll be a tough fight for him against Solecki, but let's see what he can do on the ground against Joe Solecki. He wasn't able to do anything. Now, I think Deaton will have a ground advantage here in this fight, but on the feet, I do like Alex Munoz over Carl Deaton. I'm not anticipating a finish or anything here just because it's not, maybe Munoz can get a finish. It's not a great fight. I'll just be honest with you. It's not a great fight. I think Munoz probably wins a boring decision. He's coming from Team Alpha Male in Sacramento. I'm going to take Alex Munoz to win by unanimous decision. Am I excited for the fight, nor would I bet money on the fight? No, but give me Alex Munoz to win by unanimous decision. Okay, next up, we will have Tyson Nam taking on the UFC newcomer here in Azat Maskum. I believe that's how you say his name. So it's a big fight here for Tyson Nam because he's taking on a guy who's undefeated from Kazakhstan. Maskum is 16-0 going into his 17th professional fight to take on Tyson Nam. Now, the UFC found this guy out of Brave and Octagon. He's been floating between those two promotions. And for Maskum, again, 16-0. He's got 5 wins by knockout, 6 wins by submission, and 4 by decision. But this guy's been dominant so far. He's taken out every single guy that he has seen so far in Octagon and in Brave. And now they give him Tyson Nam, who's coming off of a submission loss to Bruno Silva in his last fight. Now, Nam, I would say maybe is one of his better victories in his career is the victory over Ode Osborne, the Picasso of MMA, a fight that I didn't think Nam was going to have a chance in, but he went in there in San Diego, knocked out Ode Osborne, put him down, and finished him with a big right hook. And for Tyson Nam, he is 39 years old, he is an older flyweight, but something that's undeniable for Tyson Nam is that he's got a lot of power. This guy can strike and he can still go. So again, even at 125 pounds, we've seen Nam in his last 3 wins, he's won them all by knockout. The Zaruk Adeshev fight, I know Adeshev wasn't very good. He came into the UFC, 3-1. He came out of it 3-3, but still, Nam comes out there and knocks out Zaruk Adeshev in 32 seconds. Then he knocks out Jerome Rivera. I know Rivera was a guy too who's getting knocked out by everyone at that point, but still he knocks out Jerome Rivera. He drops a close split decision to Matt Schnell. Then he beats Ode Osborne, but then he just got submitted by Bueno Silva. But I'm still saying, Tyson Nam, he can still go. He can give you a good fight for as long, for as old as he is. He hasn't had that many fights in the UFC. Well, this will be fight number 7 for him in the promotion. He is, or fight number 8 for him. He is 3-4 in the promotion. The losses are good losses though. Sergio Pettis, Bellator champion. Kai Kara-France, former interim title challenger. Matt Schnell, top 10 guy. Bruno Silva, we'll see. But Schnell has had good fights against some of the better fighters in the flyweight division. But he's taken on a guy here in Maskum who just keeps on getting finishes. He's only got 1 decision in his last 5 fights. Maskum is good. He's really good everywhere, but really it's going to be the ground game that's going to be good for him. But also he's got power on the feet. Again, Maskum, I kind of feel is just kind of a younger version of Tyson Nam who's got power on the feet and can also get it done on the ground. Because Nam, he's a decent fighter, but good power, kind of relies on the power. He's not incredible on the ground. Most of his fights, though, have not hit the mat. He has not been taken down so far in the UFC, so there's something. But Nam has also not taken anybody else down in the UFC either. But again, Tyson Nam has primarily relied on his power to win fights. And fights that he can't get the knockout in, looking at the Sergio Pettis fight, looking at the Kai Kara-France fight, even the Matt Schnell fight, again, he was not able to score a knockdown. He looks to the knockdown. If he's not able to get the knockdown, he's usually going to get outstruck. In this fight, again, I think Maskum can match him power for power, and also think Maskum is a little bit more aggressive, and Maskum can control the volume and the pace of this fight. So I think he can also outstrike Tyson Nam as well. So I'm going to go with the favorite here. Again, there's a reason that Azat Maskum is coming in at -400, and Tyson Nam is coming out at +300. Again, there's a reason for this. I think Maskum's able to go out here and pick up the victory from Kazakhstan. I think he is going to be the first guy there to take down Tyson Nam in the UFC. I don't think he's going to really play around with the striking game because, again, that is where Maskum can get hurt, is going to be on the feet. But on the ground, I really do like Azat Maskum to go in here and pick up a victory. I think just like Bruno Silva got the submission, I think Azat Maskum's able to get the submission as well. I'm going to go a 2nd-round sub for Azat Maskum picking up his UFC debut or his win in his UFC debut. Okay, next up, we will have a fight here between Evan Elder and Genaro Valdez. For Valdez, this is a guy who, he just goes for the finish in all of his fights. I mean, he's 10-2 professionally, but if anything was to show on the Matt Frevola fight, he's going to go for it. It's kill or be killed out there. Unfortunately for him, in that fight against Matt Frevola, he was the side getting killed because he got knocked down 4 times in the span of 3 minutes in that fight. That's not good. Now, he did come back. He fought his last fight. He lost to Natan Levy, but he's taken on a guy here in Evan Elder who is 0-2 in the UFC as well. So both guys looking for their first victory in the promotion. And again, this was what I was talking about earlier. You got 2 guys again who have not won yet in the UFC fighting. You got Evan Elder coming in at 7-2, and then you got Genaro Valdez coming in at 10-2. So both guys were undefeated before they headed into the UFC. For Valdez, again, that Natan Levy fight, he does go the distance against Levy, but he just gets out-wrestled in that fight. I mean, as soon as Valdez thought he could get it going on the feet, immediately as he started getting his rhythm in, boom, Levy would take him down. That's kind of how that fight went. Valdez, you can make the case, wins the 2nd round, but rounds 1 and 3 did go to Natan Levy, and that's how Natan Levy won the fight. One judge even gave that 2nd round to Natan Levy. But even in that 1st round, the karate-style fighter in Levy was able to avoid the power at Genaro Valdez because Valdez is always going to swing big. That's just what he's going to do. But Levy was able to stay up the power range of Valdez in that 1st round, and he's able to out-kickbox him and out-karate him, I guess, to a win at least in that 1st round. And the 2nd and the 3rd, he used more of his wrestling combined with his striking to win the fight. So Valdez, again, 0-2 so far in the UFC. He picked up his contract in the Contender Series where he knocked out Patrick White in the 2nd round. He'll be getting Evan Elder here, who Elder came into the UFC with a loss to Preston Parsons. It's a fight where Parsons he 30-26s him. It's not really a competitive fight. Parsons just kind of takes Elder down at will and holds him down. And then Elder's 2nd fight in the UFC, a closer fight and a really good fight. It wins fight of the night on Andrade Blanchfield, a fight night earlier this year in February. He does knock down his opponent in Nazim Sadykhov in that fight. In the 1st round, Elder does win, and he gets out to a fiery start in that 1st round. The 2nd round, you can likely make the case that he goes out there and picks up the victory as well, or picks up the round in the 2nd round too. It's a close round though. The 3rd round though, Evan Elder does get finished as a doctor's stoppage, a cut on Elder stops the fight, but it was a way more impressive fight for Evan Elder than what Genaro Valdez has had so far in the UFC. So that gives you the confidence in Evan Elder here. I think Elder's got a lot more potential, at least in a future too in the UFC. Minus 275 is the favorite in Evan Elder. Plus 225 is the underdog in Genaro Valdez. I'm going Evan Elder to win this fight. I think a lot of people are going to go Evan Elder to win this fight. It's just that Valdez has not been all that impressive so far in the UFC. I had high hopes for the guy. I'm not going to lie, when he came into the promotion. I saw that Matt Frevola fight. Frevola was coming off a knockout, lost to Terrence McKinney. I was thinking, okay, maybe Valdez can come out here and score a knockout. He doesn't. He's the one getting knocked out in the first round. But you know what? I think you can get out this fight. You're going to get a good fight, because I really don't see much of the threat of the takedown playing in effect here. I know Evan Elder shot 6 takedowns against Nazim Sadykhov. He only got 1. So maybe he will shoot on Valdez, considering Valdez's grappling isn't the greatest. But I think for the most part, you are going to see a stand-up fight here. And it's going to be a fight where both these guys are going to trade. It's going to be a crazy back-and-forth fight on the feet. I think someone's probably going to get knocked out. Both these guys should swing big, but the difference for me in this fight is I think Evan Elder's a little bit more composed in there. I think he's got better hands. I think he's more technically sound than Genaro Valdez. I think that's what's going to be enough for Evan Elder to pick up the victory. Again, it's a fight for both these guys where they have to win to stay in the UFC. You know, both these guys are going to want it. And, oh, by the way, they're both probably going to go for the finish as well, because that's likely the best pathway to victory for both these guys in here. But I like the favorite here. Again, there's a reason Evan Elder is coming at you at minus 275. He seems like the likely winner in this one. Again, I would definitely say he's got more potential in the UFC. I'm going to go with a huge first-round knockout victory for Evan Elder, making his way into the UFC with the statement victory. All right, next up, we've got Austin Lingo taking on Costa here. For Costa coming in after his last fight where he lost on short notice. He got the call to go fight Thiago Moises. Big spot for him, UFC 283 in Brazil. He loses the fight by submission in the second round. But honestly, no shame in that. Thiago Moises is pretty good. He's a former headliner for the UFC. He's a solid fighter. And Costa's coming off. Before that, he came off the win over Junior Mello in LFA. He was fighting in a main event spot for them. He wins by knockout in the third round. Then he gets the call to the UFC. It's a well-deserved call to the UFC for Costa, who'll be getting Austin Lingo here. And honestly, I didn't do Austin Lingo justice in the intro. I said nobody's going to pay to watch Austin Lingo fight. In all fairness, Austin Lingo is coming off of a pretty entertaining fight against Nate Landwehr in his last one in front of a crowd in San Antonio on the Vera Sandhagen card. Now, in all fairness, again, I'm saying that a lot today, but it was kind of for Nate the Train. That's kind of what the hype was around that fight. But anyways, he loses to Landwehr. It's not a horrible fight for Lingo. It's really not. He stays competitive in the first round. I think he drops it, but he stays competitive. The second round, Landwehr starts to take over, gets a submission and a rear naked choke finish in the second round. Before that, for Lingo, he wins back-to-back fights over the likes of Jacob Kilburn and Luis Saldana. Now, Kilburn no longer in the UFC. He's actually had a really poor career outside the UFC. And for Luis Saldana, a guy who's actually 2-1-1 in the promotion now. He had Sean Woodson dead to rights in their fight at UFC 278, and he didn't capitalize and didn't finish the fight. But the Saldana win's a good win. He beats him by decision. He knocks down Saldana in that fight in the third round. You know, I give him a 29-28 victory. Saldana wins the first, and then Lingo pulls away towards the end, and definitely with that knockdown in the third round, Lingo goes out there and wins the fight. And then his first fight in the promotion, it's a loss to Youssef Zalal. It's a fight where he just kind of gets out-wrestled and loses the fight. But for Costa, again, we've only seen him once so far in the UFC, but this is a guy who, all around, is a pretty good fighter. Only 26 years old is Costa. 7 knockout victories to his name, 6 by submission and 6 by decision. Again, a lot of power, but a really good BJJ guy, just an all-around really good fighter. And now we're going to see him coming into the UFC off of a full camp. Because, again, when he fought Thiago Moises, he was only basically, you know, he was 2 months removed from his last fight in LFA in a main event, and then he gets Thiago Moises on somewhat short notice. It was just a tough call for him. But now he gets Lingo, and Lingo is, again, another guy who I don't think is bad at all. I think Lingo's a very solid fighter in the UFC. He's 2-2. He's shown the capability of getting it done on the feet. He's, you know, his 2 wins in the UFC, scored knockdowns in both of those. I know the Kilburn fight, it's Jacob Kilburn, but really the fight that stands out for me is Luis Saldana. You can say what you want about Saldana and the way he fought his fight in Salt Lake City last year. Still a guy who has shown success in the UFC, who is 2-1-1. I think that's a good one for Lingo, where he goes out there and does come back from losing the first round against a guy who's a solid striker in Saldana, but then he wins the next 2. And the Nate the Train spot, it's just a tough spot for him. It's Nate Landwehr. He's a fan favorite. The crowd's on his side. He gets submitted in the second round. It's going to happen to you. But now he gets Costa, apex fight. I really see this fight going either way. I mean, the odds obviously reflect that. You've got plus 130 for Lingo. You got minus 160 for Costa. for a good reason. I think that's, appropriate odds for this fight because both these guys definitely have a chance to win this fight. I mean, for Costa, you can definitely see him winning the fight on the feet, but you could also really see it on the ground as well. And then for Lingo, again, a guy who has shown very good stand-up game, and then, he hasn't gotten a finish yet in the UFC, but he's shown very good stand-up game in both the fights that he has won in the UFC. He has dropped his opponent. The favorite is Costa, I would say, for good reason. I think Costa's able to get the win, but I do think it's close. I think this is one of the closer fights in the card because, again, Lingo, you'll likely see Costa strike with Lingo, I think. You'll probably see him shoot for a takedown. You'll see who he's able to do on the ground. But for the most part, again, every fight starts on the feet, and this fight will start on the feet as well, obviously, like they all do. And you're going to see Costa and Austin Lingo strike. And even if you see Costa win the first round, again, we've seen before in the past, Lingo's able to come back and win the next two. I would not count out Austin Lingo in this fight. I think his striking game's really improved. He's shown a lot of power on the feet. He's shown the capability of being able to take a punch and then just throw it right back too. So again, watch Lingo's counters in this fight. I think Costa's going to be willing to engage in a striking fight with him. I think it's an all-around really good fight, but I am going to take the favorite. I'm going to take Costa to win this fight by unanimous decision. Just all around, I think I like him striking-wise, even though I do think Lingo's getting better, but I think Costa's a little bit faster, and I think the power is kind of split, but we've seen Costa more recently get finishes compared to Austin Lingo. And then on the ground, if it does have to the ground, I do like Costa down there as well with his grappling, with his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then as a pick, I'm going to go Costa to win by decision. I don't think we're going to see a finish because Lingo is a pretty tough guy to finish out there. But I think all-around Costa is the slightly better fighter. Again, I think we just saw him on short notice against Thiago Moises, who is a top UFC lightweight. We're seeing Costa now at his actual weight at 145 pounds because the Moises fight was at 155. I'm going to go with Costa to win this fight. I like him to take it by unanimous decision. Okay, our next fight will be at strawweight. We have got Estela Nunes getting another shot in the UFC, and she's going to be taking on the UFC newcomer here in Victoria Dudakova, I believe. Again, not too familiar with Victoria other than her fight in the Contender Series, which that was a while ago. She wins it. She's an underdog in that fight. She wins it by unanimous decision over Maria Silva. It's a good one for her. She comes in that fight at plus 220, but she comes out and picks up the victory. It's a fight where, again, Victoria, a lot of wrestling in that fight. I mean, she grounds Silva in that one. 10 minutes of control time in that fight. Wins the fight 29-28 after dropping the second round because the second round's really Silva's on the ground grappling. But Victoria will now get Estela Nunes here in her first fight. And for Estela Nunes, we talked about her last week where she is a fighter that's 0-3 in the UFC, but she did show a solid account for herself in the Yasmin Yargi fight. She loses, and she gets finished in the second round. But we thought about that fight, and we're like, okay, Estela Nunes gave Yargi probably the toughest challenge of her career. It gave Yasmin a chance to respond from some adversity where Nunes drops her in the first round. And still, Nunes definitely probably wins that first round. Again, it catches up to her. Yargi really comes out there and runs right through Nunes in the second, drops her a couple times in that second round, and eventually gets the finish. But all around, not a horrible performance for Estela Nunes, and likely the fight that the UFC thought it was fair enough to give her another shot in the UFC, even though she is 0-3 in the promotion, and she has lost 4 of her last 5 fights. You go all the way back to 2017 where she got a shot for the one strawweight championship, fighting Angela Lee. She loses that fight to Lee by anaconda choke in the second round, then wins a fight again in one championship by unanimous decision, gets the call to the UFC, they sign her, booked against Angela Hill, fight doesn't happen, Nunes gets hurt, booked against Jinyu Fry doesn't happen, Nunes gets hurt, then she withdraws from the fight, then she fights Ariane Carnelossi submits her in the third, has a fight after that against Sam Hughes where she drops it by majority decision. Sam Hughes beats her 29-27 on 2 cards and then 28-28 on the other card. Again, it was just a good first round out of Estela Nunes, and then she kind of just fell off a cliff from there, and that's kind of what we're thinking out of Estela Nunes too. It's just, what are we going to get out of Estela Nunes? Because she's shown that she can come out and really fire away in that first round, but after that first round, it's kind of tough for her. That's at least how her last 2 fights have gone. You look at the Carnelossi fight. Carnelossi just takes her down for the most part in that fight too. Nunes has a decent first round until she gets taken down. In the third round, again, she gets taken down and submitted. But that's kind of been the problem for Estela Nunes. It's been strong starts, but then she's just kind of fallen off a cliff after that. For her opponent, Victoria, coming off that win over Maria Silva, but before that, had 2 back-to-back fights in open fighting championship, 1 back-to-back fights at strawweight over there. For Dudakova, she wants to get fights on the ground, obviously, like you could see in that Contender Series fight. And then outside the UFC too, it's been a lot of submission victories for her. She was not able to get the finish over Maria Silva. Again, though, that's a fight that she wasn't supposed to win. Silva was coming into that fight undefeated, 8-0. She had won the Contender Series the year before. Silva, since that loss to Victoria, has gone to KSW and picked up a victory over there in KSW. We'll see if we see Maria Silva again in the Contender Series this year. But again, for Victoria, it's a huge victory, and it's no shame in not submitting a fighter like Maria Silva, who's got a pretty good ground game as a whole. But she was able to control her down there. She was able to have a lot of success down there, even though losing the second round. Rounds 1 and 3 were very kind to Victoria, where she was able to go out there and pick up the victory. I think she'll be able to do the same thing to Estela Nunes here. I don't really know. I don't think Estela Nunes is going to have too many answers to the ground game. Now, okay, this kind of does remind me of a fight, though, a couple weeks ago. And I'm not saying, again, I'm not saying this is going to happen to Victoria as my camera dies. I'm not saying it's going to happen the same thing to Victoria here against Estela Nunes, but you look back at that card, the Strickland Magomedov card, a lot of hype on Ivana Petrovic. Petrovic is a very good submission fighter, a very good grappler. A lot of hype on her. People thought she was going to run right through Luana Carolina. She loses. She was not able to get a submission. I'm not saying the same thing's going to happen to Victoria here, but I'm picking another UFC women's fighter in her debut to go out there and get a submission. I know Estela Nunes has not had, at all close to the level of success Luana Carolina has had in the UFC. Estela Nunes is still looking for her first victory, and unfortunately, I don't think she's going to get it right here. I think Victoria is able to go out there and pick up a big submission victory in the first round. We're going to go with the Russian fighter. Actually, not first round. We're going to go second round because Estela Nunes, again, has shown she's able to do well in the first round, but then it falls off after that first round. So it's going to be Victoria Dudakova to win this fight by second round submission. All right, up next, we have got a fight here between Tucker Lutz and Melzik Baghdasaryan. I think this might be headlining the prelims. I'm not entirely sure, but it's a fight at 145 pounds here. I think it is. Yeah, it is headlining the prelims on ESPN Plus. So Tucker Lutz comes in this fight with a record of 12-3. For Baghdasaryan, he's going to come in this fight with a record of 7-2. Baghdasaryan, is coming off that loss to Joshua Kalibau, where he gets submitted. I believe that was in Abu Dhabi. Yeah, I was going to say Singapore. But he gets submitted by Kalibau in the second round with a rear naked choke. For Lutz, his last fight was a loss to Daniel Pineda in San Diego. Pineda catches him in a guillotine choke and submits him in the second round. It's the fight that Pineda, after that, plays to the crowd, says, "Hey, all my wins ever have been by submission or knockout. I've never gone to the scorecards." Crowd got behind him. Unfortunately, though, he just lost to Alex Caceres, Bruce Leroy, in his last fight. But again, Lutz loses by second round submission, and before that, he ran into another very good grappler in Pat Sabatini. However, Pineda was putting it on Lutz on the feet in that fight, but he fought a very good grappler in Pat Sabatini. Pat Sabatini went in there and absolutely killed him on the ground. You're looking at 30-26s on that card, on that fight, because again, Tucker Lutz was just not able to get going in that fight. Pat Sabatini, the second round, he's got Lutz down for 4 minutes and 40 seconds. Again, I mean, yeah, the fight was only on the feet for 20 seconds in that second round. The first round's all Sabatini 2 grappling. Like, Lutz got beat up on the ground in that fight. He started off his UFC career by beating Kevin Aguilar, but Kevin Aguilar, I mean, I don't even know, what was Kevin Aguilar's last fight? It was the Tucker Lutz fight. Yeah, he's not fought in the UFC since. He went 2-4 in the promotion after starting off with wins over, in all fairness, good wins against Ricky Glenn and Enrique Barzola, but then dropped 4 straight to Dan Ige, Zubaira Tukugov, Charles Rosa, and Tucker Lutz. But Lutz beats Kevin Aguilar in that fight. He goes out there, outstrikes him, mixes in with the wrestling too as he scores a takedown in every single round too. But again, an all-around really good performance out of Tucker Lutz. Was able to mix up his striking with his grappling. He'll get Melzik Baghdasaryan in this fight. And for Baghdasaryan, 2-1 in the UFC. It's a win over Colin Anglin in his first fight, where he comes in his UFC debut against another guy who's making his UFC debut in Anglin and just outstrikes him. Catches him with a big head kick and knocks him out in the second round. It's a big victory from Baghdasaryan. And then he gets Bueno Silva in his next fight at Madison Square Garden on that Usman Covington 2 card. Just another really good striking performance for Baghdasaryan. He drops around in that fight, but still is able to go out there and outstrike Bruno Souza to victory. And then his last fight was a fight against Joshua Kalibau, where he wins the first round striking, but in the second round, again, Kalibau gets him down, submits him with a rear naked choke, ends the fight. So Baghdasaryan has still shown, though, he's a really good striker. He's able to go out there and outstrike guys. He was able to win in the Contender Series back in 2020. A lot of power out of Melzik Baghdasaryan. He had a streak before heading on to the UFC. It was every single fight, every single win that he had prior to the Contender Series. 4 fights, all by knockout, and those times of those 4 fights combined were under a minute. It was crazy. So Baghdasaryan does have that power. As you saw in the Colin Anglin fight too, he has the power to knock guys out and put them out. We'll see what he's able to do against Tucker Lutz, because I think Lutz will go with the grappling here. I think even though I know he has been out-grappled in his last 2 fights, the best pathway to victory by far for him in this fight will be to wrestle Baghdasaryan, because we've just talked about the great kickboxing game that Baghdasaryan does have and the power that he does possess as well. So I think it is in Lutz's best interest to go in here and grapple Baghdasaryan, which should give him a chance. Like, it honestly should, because you look at the odds, you've got Lutz at plus 170, you got Baghdasaryan at minus 200. Again, it will give Tucker Lutz a very fair shake to win this fight, I think, if he's able to go out there and out-wrestle Baghdasaryan. But then there's another world where Tucker Lutz is not able to out-wrestle Baghdasaryan, and Baghdasaryan just outstrikes him. It's really dependent on, for Baghdasaryan, if he gets the finish in the first round. If he doesn't, I think it's just going to go to decision. If you're thinking Baghdasaryan wins. And for Tucker Lutz, in all fairness, I think he'll probably win by decision too if he gets the win. So I can stop saying all fairness. In all fairness, I've said that like 20 times today. But I think, if Baghdasaryan wins, he'll likely be either knockout in the first round or by decision, because if he doesn't get the knockout in the first round, he'll likely just coast to victory with his striking. For Tucker Lutz, again, it will probably be by decision too, either with him wrestling or with him outstriking Baghdasaryan also. I'm going to take the Armenian fighter, though. I'm going to take Baghdasaryan. I like him to win this fight. Again, I said it, first round knockout or decision. I'll go first round knockout. I want things to be entertaining in the UFC Apex. I want to see a fun fight, so I'm going to take Baghdasaryan to win this fight by first round knockout. I don't think he's going to allow Lutz to wrestle him. I think he's going to keep Lutz on the feet. He'll probably stuff all of Lutz's takedowns that he does attempt, and while that fight's on the feet early, I think Baghdasaryan is going to catch Lutz with something, maybe a kick, just like he did against Anglin. He'll set something up, and the kickboxing and the Muay Thai for Baghdasaryan should push him through. I think he's able to win this fight. I'm going to take Baghdasaryan and beat Tucker Lutz. He'll get it done by first round knockout. All right, so an all-action type of fight now, kicking off the main card, and thank God it is, because they had this fight buried on the undercard at first, but it's Terrence T-Rex McKinney taking on Nazim Sadykhov here. What a fight. I mean, this is an all-action type of fight. This is the type of fight that gets you up in the morning, because it's a good one. Terrence McKinney, oh my goodness, comes in this fight after a loss where, yes, he got knocked out and sent to the Shadow Realm against Ismail Bonfim. He gets knocked down in the second round for Bonfim. Couldn't carry that fight. Couldn't carry that win into his fight against Benoit Saint Denis. Saint Denis submitted him in the first round. But for McKinney, again, this is a guy 3-2 in the UFC, win through Matt Favola in his UFC debut in 7 seconds, then a win over Faraziem in the first round, then a crazy fight, round of the year in 2022 was round 1, Drew Dober, Terrence McKinney. An absolutely crazy round. I did predict Drew Dober to win that fight, and we got that fight correct, but Dober TKOs Terrence McKinney in the first round. Then McKinney goes out there and fights Eric Gonzalez in a fight where, just kind of weird they made that fight, because McKinney was a minus 900 favorite. He goes out there and submits Gonzalez in the first round, and then he runs into Ismail Bonfim, and he loses. He gets knocked down in the second round. Now he's getting Nazim Sadykhov, and it's a fight that McKinney is an underdog in. He's fighting Sadykhov, a guy who's coming off a win over Evan Elder, who we talked about earlier. But like we said earlier in this video, Evan Elder was arguably up 2 rounds in that fight. Evan Elder got out to a really good start in that fight. He was out striking Sadykhov. He was really beating him to the punch, and he knocked him down 2 in the first round, which definitely opens up a lot of opportunities, I think, for Terrence McKinney in this fight. Again, Elder was trying to mix it up with the takedowns, couldn't get them. Sadykhov takes him down once, very briefly in the second round. But for the most part, you're going to see a striking fight between these two guys. I mean, Sadykhov got his UFC contract on the Contender Series in 2022, picking up a knockout victory in the third round. Fought before that in Fury FC. Was able to go out there and pick up a couple victories by knockout and submission. Sadykhov fought in various regional promotions. He fought in Ring of Combat up in New York, as CFFC, Philly area, and then of course in Fury too. He now gets Terrence McKinney, which definitely probably, 100% is his toughest matchup to date. Because say what you want. Yes, McKinney just got knocked down and is in brutal fashion, but the guy can still go. I know the fight against Bonfim, he's getting beat. It was just weird. He looked awfully slow in that fight. Maybe it's just how good Ismail Bonfim is, but Bonfim just lost. I don't know how to really take that one. But again, McKinney, it's just an off night for Terrence McKinney. And before that, again, the Eric Gonzalez fight, I don't really know what you can put into that fight, because it was just a mismatch. I think most guys in the UFC would do that to Eric Gonzalez. The Dober fight's good, because that was a huge step up in competition for McKinney. He loses to Dober. He almost has Dober out in the first round. That's always something with McKinney too. He's going to give you a fiery first round. That's why the Bonfim fight was weird, because didn't really do much in the first round. It was kind of odd. But he almost beat Dober, but then he got finished, of course, later in that round. The Parisian fight, he goes out there, gets the submission win early, knocks out Matt Frevola before that. You're going to see an exciting fight whenever Terrence McKinney fights. I mean, even in his loss, right? His 2 losses have been very entertaining, too. I mean, one of them he got sent to the Shadow Realm. The other one's a really back-and-forth fight, and a fight that, again, I think was probably the round of the year in 2022. It was in the Apex. That's what kind of puts it down the list. But still, good fight against Drew Dober. I know maybe the Michael Chandler. Oh, no, that was in 2021. Who am I kidding? Let's say Chandler Gaethje. Chandler Poirier was pretty good, too. I'm just saying. In 2022. But again, you have McKinney and Sadykhov here. You're going to see a striking fight. McKinney's going to be the one to shoot for takedowns if he does, because Terrence can get it done on the ground. I mean, before the UFC, he had a lot of submission victories, but once he's gotten to the UFC and just more recently in his career, it's been more of the striking out of him. I know, again, his last 2 wins in the UFC are by submission, but in this fight, I think it's going to be the striking out of him that's probably going to win the fight for him. Again, I could see the grappling too if he needs to mix it up, if he is in trouble. But odds are close for this one for good reason. You've got Terrence McKinney at plus 130. You got Nazim Sadykhov at minus 160. Going to go with the underdog. First underdog pick of the video, going Terrence McKinney to win this fight. I like him to win by first round knockout. Again, this fight, you're going to see a knockout either way. I think so. Because, again, McKinney fights killed or be killed. For Sadykhov, again, I don't think he's going to... I don't think Nazim Sadykhov can go 15 minutes in this fight without either A, getting a knockout and finishing Terrence McKinney, or B, getting knocked out by Terrence McKinney. It's going to go one of 2 ways. I'm siding to go with the way of Terrence McKinney. I think McKinney's able to go out there, really sprint to a finish in the first round and knock him out. I could definitely see McKinney drop him too and go for a submission, or even I could see him going straight for a submission as well and use his wrestling. But again, Sadykhov's the Serra-Longo guy. He's pretty solid. The wrestling is the defensive wrestling is probably there if he needs it. But I'll take Terrence McKinney to win this fight. I like him to take this one by first round knockout. Should be a war, but get me T-Rex, Terrence McKinney to win this fight by first round knockout, kicking off the main card. Okay, next up we've got a fight between, Otman Azaitar is back. Yeah, I mean, you remember his last fight in the UFC. It was a loss to the guy we just talked about, Matt Frevola. And now Otman Azaitar was the infamous fighter who got cut from the UFC because back, of course, when everything was all pandemic and locked down, Otman Azaitar had a package delivered to his room, or his team delivered a package to his room when everyone was supposed to be quarantined. When, again, this is Abu Dhabi, when everyone locked down, and it just kind of was a big exposure, and he got cut from the UFC because of it. Now, they brought him back to take on Matt Frevola, and he was a pretty heavy favorite going into that one, or at least a decent favorite. He gets knocked down the first round. Frevola just catches him and puts him down early. And now he'll get Francisco Prado in his second fight back with the UFC, given, again, Otman Azaitar did not fight anywhere else since that incident. Eventually, it came out that it was potatoes that was delivered to his room, which is just odd, but that's apparently what it was. He'll now get Francisco Prado, a guy coming off a loss to Jamie Mullarkey in his first fight in the UFC. He kind of just gets beat down in that fight. He really can't get going. Mullarkey out-wrestles him in the first. In the second round, Mullarkey outstrikes him. In the third round, more of the same. Prado just doesn't really do much in that fight. It's just not the greatest UFC debut for him. And he came into that fight undefeated. It was a fight where he was a pretty sizable underdog. Coming off wins in Samurai Fight House, that's the promotion that he was fighting in. He went 6-0 over there in that promotion over in Argentina. But for Prado, just mixed bag of knockouts and submissions. It'll make for an interesting fight because we get him versus an Otman Azaitar who, again, we haven't seen recently. What Otman Azaitar are we going to get? Because prior to the Frevola fight, he did look pretty good in the UFC, but now in hindsight, when you look at the 2 guys he fought a guy, is a huge knockout in the first round, the Habib Poirier card. Fought a guy, a Finnish fighter. It's a guy who hasn't fought since. He fought Timu, and then after that, he knocks out Kama Worthy in the first round. But Kama Worthy, again, now outside the UFC, he won 2 fights after getting cut, and they gave him Trevor Peek. He loses to Trevor Peek, which, I mean, is understandable. Peek's a UFC guy who, again, just lost his first fight in the UFC to Mariscal. And then he won Kama Worthy's now 3-1 outside the UFC. He's undefeated in 24-7 FC, I guess, his Pittsburgh promotion. But anyways, that's Otman Azaitar's 2 wins in the UFC, and they were both first-round knockouts. But again, against what competition? And yeah, we just talked about the competition. It wasn't great competition. And now he gets Francisco Prado, a guy who's very young. He's 21 years old, who goes for the kill as well. This guy's going to come for the knockout too. So you got 2 guys who are just going to try to knock each other out. Who had the better last fight? I don't know, honestly, because both these guys had bad last fights. Prado gets beat up for 15 minutes, and Azaitar gets knocked out in the first round. Azaitar's fight was back in 2022. I believe that was in Madison Square Garden. It was Adesanya Pereira. And for Prado, that fight was in Australia in the Volkanovski-Makhachev card. So, again, you got two guys who are coming off bad fights, nothing to lose. They're probably just going to both go for the finish, and like the Terrence McKinney and Nazim Sadykhov fight, you're probably going to knock out early. And I think that's why this fight is so high on the card, because, again, very likely we're going to see a finish in this one. And I'm going to go with the younger fighter here. I think Francisco Prado is slightly faster. And, again, I don't want to bank on picking Azaitar coming off his last fight, because he was not good in his last fight. So I'm going to take Francisco Prado to win this fight. I will take the favorite just because, again, Azaitar just did not look good at all in his last one. I think Prado is just the quicker fighter. I think power-wise, they match up pretty evenly. But, again, Azaitar just looked a little bit hesitant to pull the trigger in his last fight. I know it was a short fight, but still, Frevola was getting to him before Azaitar was getting to him. And I think Francisco Prado is going to be able to get to Azaitar before Azaitar can get to Francisco Prado. So we're going to take Prado to win this fight by first round knockout. Now, we have a fight between Norma Dumont and Chelsea Chandler. All right, we're at 145 pounds. We just saw a fight at 145 in the women's division between Yana Santos and Carol Hossa. Hossa wins it by split decision. Now, okay, last we heard about the 145-pound weight class. It was after UFC 289 in Vancouver. It's the press conference. Reporter asked Dana White, well, hey, Amanda's retired. It's a time we're going to, phase out the 145-pound weight class. Dana says, yeah, probably. Well, there's still fights at 145 pounds. There's been 2 fights at 145. I think there's one other one. They're still doing fights at 145, which doesn't make sense considering you're saying you're going to, get this weight class out of here, but yet we're still booking fights. And, Chelsea Chandler's a fighter who primarily fights at 145 pounds. I don't think she's fought at 135 in her career since her early Invicta days. Yeah, not since 2019, so it's been 4 years for her. She is a featherweight. And now, Juliana Pena said a quote back when she was trying to campaign for her first fight against Amanda Nunes. She said, well, hey, Amanda's only a double champion because they had Chris Cyborg, and now 145 is a weight class where all the girls just don't want to cut to 135. Say what you want about that. But again, Norma Dumont's a fighter that's fought 135 pounds before. Chelsea Chandler has fought 135 pounds, but a long time ago. But again, are you going to can this weight class? So what do you do with a fighter like Chelsea Chandler? Well, her last fight was at 140 catchweight against Julia Stoliarenko, where she wins by TKO in the first round. So maybe you do see Chelsea Chandler drop down 135 pounds. I'm just saying, UFC continues to book these fights at featherweight, even though they don't have a featherweight champion. They don't have rankings. And Dana said they're probably going to cut the weight class. So it doesn't make sense. We got Norma Dumont, who has been, I hate to say this, kind of the uncrowned champion at 145. She kind of just beats everybody in that weight class who primarily fights 145 pounds. Because Macy Chasson beat her by split decision at UFC 274 in Arizona. But other than that, yeah, Dumont's been kind of running through fighters at 145 pounds. The uncrowned championship run starts for her when she beats Felicia Spencer by split decision. She beats Aspen Ladd at a main event in 2021. She loses to Chasson. She beats Danielle Wolf by unanimous decision. And then she beats Carol Hossa by unanimous decision. The Hossa win probably her best one. It's a close fight because Hossa does drop her in the third round. But Dumont, yeah, I think does enough in the first 2 rounds to pick up the wins in those 2 rounds and then drops the third. So you get 29-28 for Dumont. Dumont just kind of does just enough to win fights. She dropped Danielle Wolf in their fight at UFC 279. It was a dominant performance. Dumont, again, just kind of does enough. When she needs to strike, she can strike. When she needs to grapple, she can grapple. In a fight with Chelsea Chandler, she'll probably, I don't know, because Chelsea Chandler, her last fight did finish Julia Stoliarenko on the ground. I think Dumont's just going to do enough. She'll stay on the outside. She'll keep her range, and she'll probably just outstrike Chelsea Chandler from distance. I'm not too sold on Chandler. Again, a win over Julia Stoliarenko is great, but Stoliarenko, 1-5 in the UFC. Her second run in the UFC, again, she's 1-4. She's won 1 fight. It was an armbar submission win over Jessica Rose Clark. She gets booked 3 months later, loses to Chelsea Chandler, and get this, her next fight, she's in a co-main event against Molly McCann. What are we doing? Why? And it's at 125 pounds. And Stoliarenko's last fight was at 140 pounds. So Chelsea Chandler's 1 win in the UFC. She fought a fighter fighting up 15 pounds in weight, even though Stoliarenko, in all fairness, though, I keep saying that, but she has fought 145 pounds before. She fought in the Ultimate Fighter 145 pounds, where she lost to Penny Kinzad, and then went on to lose to Leah Letson on the finale card. So, and then the Yana Santos fight, I think, was at 35. I don't know. Stoliarenko just keeps going up and down weight classes. But that's Chandler's 1 win in the UFC. It's a finish in the first, which is great. But I think Norma Dumont's way better. I think a lot of people anticipate Norma Dumont to be the way better fighter in this fight too. I'm very surprised at the odds. I'll be honest with you, minus 125 and plus 100. Again, do not bet on women's MMA in general, but especially don't bet on this fight because you never know what you're going to get out of Norma Dumont. But I think maybe it's worth playing a little bit on Norma Dumont here. Maybe. Okay, because I think, at least, I'm recording this on the 5th, at least right now, the odds are not bad for Norma Dumont. I think minus 125 are pretty good odds for Dumont. I think she goes out here and picks up the victory. I'll take her by unanimous decision. Again, not getting in too much danger. I think she'll stay on the outside, kind of just outstrike Chelsea Chandler for 15 minutes. It's going to be Dumont to win. All right. Next up, it is the return of the former headliner, Walt Harris, and he gets entered now into our favorite discussion with the heavyweight division. He gets entered into the low-level heavyweight gauntlet. It will be Josh Parisian will now step right up in terms of the low heavyweights or the low-level heavyweights in the UFC. So Josh Parisian so far in the promotion, he is actually has a better record than most of these guys down the low-level heavyweight ranks, but he's fought a lot of the guys from the low-level heavyweights. He's 2-3. Now, his wins, Parker Porter, low-level heavyweight, Roque Martinez, low-level heavyweight, Dontel Mays, low-level heavyweight. Even though, hey, he beat Andrei Arlovsky, so maybe he's progressed up the ranks. Maybe he's no longer in that. He's graduated from that. Alain Baudot, low-level heavyweight. Jamal Pogues, we just don't know yet, because Jamal Pogues, in all fairness, gotta keep saying that, but Pogues has only had one fight in the UFC and he's won, and he'll get Michael Parkin in his next one in a couple weeks. We'll see how that fight goes. But Parisian beats Pogues. He was booked against Chase Sherman, low-level heavyweight, and that's really been the run for Josh Parisian so far. Again, he's beat Roque Martinez by split decision, and then he finished Alain Baudot in the second round, and then he got his face humped by Dontel Mays back in 2021. Okay, he gets Walt Harris. So the big ticket has not fought since his loss to Marcin Tybura in 2021. Thought that was kind of a death matchup for him, because he was coming off fights where they gave Walt Harris some good fighters. It's tough for Walt Harris, of course, everything that he went through before the Alistair Overeem fight, but he loses the Overeem fight, and they book him against Alexander Volkov. That is a very tough fight, and I think they were high on Walt Harris because he picked up 3 straight wins over Andrei Arlovsky, Sergey Spivak, and Alexei Oleinik. Now, the best win by far is the Spivak win, because look at Spivak now. He's going to be in a main event spot against Cyril Gane in Paris, and he's coming off a win over Derek Lewis. So, again, the Spivak win ages really well for Walt Harris, but they kind of pushed him a little bit too much, I think, after those 3 wins. It's just because, again, the UFC heavyweight division is really thin, so you have a guy who's beat Arlovsky, Spivak, and Oleinik. I know the Arlovsky fight got overturned, but still technically picked up the win. You get a guy who's won those 3 fights, they're going to push him pretty heavily. He loses the Alistair Overeem fight where he gets finished in the second round. Okay, then they book him against Volkov, he gets liver kicked, with a solar plexus kick or whatever, and then he gets Marcin Tybura, and he gets knocked down in the first round. TKO'd in the first round because Tybura took him down. Well, Tybura's really good. I mean, Tybura was coming off a 4-fight winning streak at that point. I mean, he beat Spivak, Grecian, Rothwell, and Greg Hardy, and then they booked against Walt Harris, and then he beats Walt Harris. And I'm glad Walt Harris didn't take the Tai Tuivasa fight because he probably would have lost. That was in Abu Dhabi. That one was going to be bad, I thought. I'm glad he withdrew from that one because he took that fight like 4 months after fighting Tybura. Didn't make sense. And Tuivasa was on the way back up. So I'm glad Harris didn't take that fight. I don't know who Tuivasa ended up fighting. I don't think he ended up fighting on that card. It's fine. Walt Harris gets Josh Parisian. Now again, Parisian's 2-3. The Pogues fight, he just kind of gets out wrestled in. He doesn't really win a round. The Alain Baudot fight, he gets finished. He gets a finish against Alain Baudot, but Alain Baudot was not very good. Dontel Mays beats him by TKO in the third round. It's the fight where, is kind of funny because he gets humped at the end of the second round where they're in north-south position and just Dontel Mays just lowers his hip right into his face and it's just kind of his crotch. So it's just, it was funny. I'm not going to lie. Before that, for Parisian, he beats Roque Martinez, and then he's got the back and forth fight against Parker Porter in his first fight in the UFC. I think it was Porter. No, it's Porter's second fight because he debuted against Chris Dawkins. Anyways, Porter beats him by unanimous decision. Now, okay, Walt Harris should definitely win this fight. I'm gonna take Walt Harris because Harris is definitely the favorite to win this fight. He's 40 years old now. I didn't know that. Still, Walt Harris should win. Again, before he took the hiatus, which was 2 years, still a top 15 guy. Josh Parisian has never been around the top 15 his entire career. So there's that. I know Walt Harris, again, it's been a while, but do you really think Josh Parisian over the last couple, fights has gotten to the point where he can be borderline top 15? No, not at all. So I think Walt Harris is the way better fighter. I think he's got more power. I think he's going to go right after Josh Parisian. And Parisian's likely not going to be the guy to knock you out. Even though, again, if Harris runs into a big shot, he probably will get finished because, again, it's heavyweight fighting. So Harris got to be somewhat cautious going into this fight. But I think Walt Harris is the better fighter. Walt Harris is better than Josh Parisian. He's got more power. And I think he's going to win. So it's going to be Walt Harris to come back in this return fight. I know he's 40 years old now, so that's a little bit tough. But Walt Harris is able to win this fight in his return. Give me Walt Harris to win this one by first round knockout. Co-main event time. Albert Duraev gets a co-main event spot against Jun-Young Park. Yeah, it's just kind of odd this is a co-main event, but it is. I'm surprised it didn't go unranked heavyweight co-main event like they usually do, but Duraev gets Jun-Young Park, and for Albert Duraev, it's a big win in his last fight over at Shidi Njokuani. He beats Njokuani by split decision, and for Jun-Young Park, they give him a layup matchup, for being honest, in his last one. He beats Denis Tululen, where he submits him in the first round. I think everyone and their mother saw that one coming. I said second round submission for Park, but whatever. It was just a fight that, we really thought Park was going to win. It's odd, because Jun-Young Park, after beating Eric Anders, they kind of just gave him couple lower level guys. I like Joe Holmes, I really do, but Joe Holmes isn't great. And Jun-Young Park submitted Joe Holmes in the second round, and then they give him Denis Tululen, and he submits Denis Tululen. Well, Tululen was coming off a fight where he lost in his first UFC fight to one. Oh no, he forgot to beat Jamie Pickett. I forgot the Pickett fight happened. He lost to Ali Hashab Hizraev in his first fight, and then he beat Jamie Pickett, and then he lost to Jun-Young Park. Now he's booked against Gregory Rodriguez, and it's like, why are they doing this to this guy? What did he do to deserve these fights? And Denis Tululen, I don't know who he pissed off, but he's getting some very tough fights, and he'll get Gregory Rodriguez in Boston in August. But Jun-Young Park is coming off that submission win over Tululen. He's 6-2 in the UFC. The losses are his first UFC fight to Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, where he gets submitted in the second round, but no shame in that. Anthony Hernandez submitted Rodolfo Vieira, so can't really get mad at that one. And then it's the Gregory Rodriguez knockout in the second round back in 2021. Well, RoboCop's really good. For Duraev, 16-4 professional record, but 2-1 in the UFC. The loss being the Joaquin Buckley fight, and that really just fun fight over in Austin, Texas. The crowd was really on Buckley's side in that one. I saw Joaquin Buckley retweet a tweet that said, in 2 years, this is going to be International Fight Week main event, and it was Shavkat Rakhmonov and Joaquin Buckley. That'd be really funny if that happened. I doubt it will. But anyways, Duraev lost to Buckley. Buckley just outstrikes him, really. Duraev is looking for a lot of takedowns in that fight. He goes 2 for 9. He can't really get him. So Buckley just outstrikes him. And in that second round, he really takes over and puts a lot of damage into Albert Duraev. And eventually gets the doctor stoppage, right? In Duraev's first fight in the UFC, he beats Roman Kopylov by unanimous decision. It's a fight that he has to deal with a little bit of troubles in that fight because Duraev went really wrestle heavy starting in the second round because he gets dropped in that second round. In the third round, he kind of just does enough just to kind of survive. It was a really interesting fight where it was closer than you probably want for Albert Duraev. That's all I'm going to say. It was a closer fight than you thought the Roman Kopylov UFC debut fight it was going to be. But the Chidi Njokuani one's huge because he goes out there and he beats Njokuani. I think he wins rounds 1 and 2. He out wrestles Njokuani in the first. The second round's sort of the split round. That's the round that caused the split decision. It's really close. You look at the significant strike totals, 16-14 for Duraev, so he barely outstrikes Njokuani. The third round, Njokuani wins. So it's just an incredibly close fight, but Duraev barely gets the victory. He'll now get Jun-Young Park. Now, this fight's dependent on who will have the advantage wrestling and who will have the grappling advantage in this fight. That's what this fight, I think, is primarily dependent on. Because Duraev, again, he's shown that, he can fight on the feet, but sometimes he gets beat up there. Like, again, Kopylov was able to take advantage of him on the feet. Njokuani had some success. Joaquin Buckley had a lot of success. But on the other hand, Jun-Young Park's not the greatest striker either. But Jun-Young Park has had some fights where he's been able to outstrike some guys. Eric Anders, the fight against Stefan Chukwi. But he has a lot of fights too where he goes in there and just tries to take guys down and out-wrestle them. We're looking at the Marc-Andre Barriault fight, looking at the John Phillips fight, and the Joe Holmes fight, and the Tululen fight. Like, he's had a lot of fights where he's shown that he can wrestle and grapple. So, it's close because I think Duraev likely wants to fight on the ground. But Jun-Young Park's not a bad grappler either. And then on the feet, Duraev really has not shown me anything to tell me that he's a great striker. And I think Jun-Young Park is the slightly better striker between him and Duraev. So then it comes down to the grappling. I think Duraev will be able to get takedowns, but how much success will he really have down there? Will he be able to hold Jun-Young Park down? Probably. He probably will be able to hold Park down. But again, how much success will he have once the fight just hit the mat? I don't know. On the feet, again, I think Park is the slightly better fighter. I've not been impressed with Albert Duraev striking at all, and Jun-Young Park is not a great striker, but he has gone at the UFC level and shown up and beat guys. And when he's needed to win fights, he's gone out there and outstruck guys. You look at the odds. The South Korean fighter in the Iron Turtle in Park is a favorite at -140. You got Duraev at +110. On Tapology, Duraev is the favorite. 55% of voters going with Duraev and 45% of voters going with Junior Park. I'm going to go with the minority here. I'm taking Junior Park to win the fight. Basically how I broke it down, I think the only way Duraev wins this fight is if he can take Junior Park down and hold Junior Park down. But other than that, I like Park's striking. I like his offensive grappling. It's just dependent on me if Junior Park can stay off his back, which I think he'll be able to. It's not like Duraev's a crazy wrestler. I know outside the UFC he was that guy, but so far in the UFC he's shown that he really can't, he hasn't, soared right through the competition. I know the Njokuani win is huge, but other than that first round, he isn't overly impressive. So again, he beat Njokuani by outstriking Njokuani in the second round, which is huge. That is absolutely big because Njokuani is a good striker. I don't know if he's able to do that again, though. And I'm not saying Junior Park's a better striker than Njokuani, but I think Park, and if you give him a round against Duraev on the feet, I think Park's going to overwhelm him with strikes. He's going to really crowd him, and he's going to outvolume him. So I think, if that happens, Park's going to be able to outstrike him. And on the ground, I think the only way Duraev's able to pick up points and win a round is by out-grappling Junior Park and getting top control. Other than that, I like Junior Park. So I'm going to take the Iron Turtle to win this fight. I like him to get it done by unanimous decision. And now we go to the main event. In the bantamweight division, it will be the former title challenger, the Preacher's daughter, Holm, takes on Mayra Bueno Silva. Okay, so again, we said in the open, Holm was likely, I think, going to get a title shot if he's able to win. She's likely to get a title shot if she's able to win this fight. For Mayra Bueno Silva, is she able to get a title shot with a victory? No, not at all. I mean, we'll go to the UFC rankings and we'll look at that after I make my final prediction, but I don't think it's likely for Mayra to get a title shot with victory just because, again, you have Raquel Pennington, you have other fighters who are probably more deserving of a title shot than her, but Holly with a victory is fairly well deserving as well. It's real quick, I'm looking at the UFC website. So the Bantamweight Championship has been vacated. Amanda Nunes is still the Featherweight Champion. Why? I don't know. Anyways, so Holly Holm's number 3, Mayra Bueno Silva's number 10. For Mayra Bueno Silva, her last fight is a victory in a huge spot against Lena Landsberg on that Andrade Blanchfield card. She's able to go out there and pick up a huge victory over Landsberg by knee bar in the second round. Now, Mayra was supposed to fight Miesha Tate earlier. After the Landsberg fight fell through, Tate dropped out. Don't get me wrong, it's a good one for Mayra Bueno Silva beating Lena Landsberg and getting a finish against Landsberg because she's the first fighter to get a finish against Lena Landsberg since 2017 where Aspen Ladd did it. But that was on the tail end of a 4-fight losing streak for Lena Landsberg. She had lost to Sarah McMahon, she had lost to Penny Kianzad, and she had lost to Carol Hossa as well. And okay, Mayra gets the finish in the knee bar submission, but Lena's been losing a lot, right? And then Mayra Bueno Silva before that, she beats Wu Yanan by unanimous decision, and then she beats Stephanie Egger by armbar in the first round. The Egger win's good, and there's no denying how good of a ground game Mayra Bueno Silva has. That was a fight I think Stephanie Egger, she taps, and then she was like, oh no, I didn't tap, even though they watched the replay and she obviously did tap. It was kind of weird on that end for Stephanie Egger, but I think that was that fight, right? It was an early first round submission win for Mayra Bueno Silva. So that's great and all. Mayra's got great jiu-jitsu, but Holly Holm has shown in the past and recently, and I'm looking at the Irina Aldana fight, I'm looking at the Yana Santos fight, really good offensive wrestler, and that's just something that Holly Holm's kind of adapted into at the tail end of her career. It's kind of a way that she's put longevity on her career as well, where she doesn't have to go out here and outstrike her opponents every single fight, but she's able to really clinch a lot. She's able to get close and just kind of, body lock her way to get her opponent down, just kind of keep him down. She wanted to get the submission in the Yana Santos fight because she hasn't gotten one yet in her career. She couldn't get it, but she was able to go out there and out wrestle and out position Yana Santos to victory. And even in the Irina Aldana fight too, she was able to go out there and hold Irina Aldana down. Now, Holly Holm has not wrestled a fighter of the jiu-jitsu caliber that Mayra Bueno Silva is. Bueno Silva has got some pretty good jiu-jitsu. I think she's a really good BJJ player. I think it's going to be a big factor in this fight. But my thing is, again, I don't know if Holly's got her down. I don't know what Mayra Bueno Silva really, unless, because I think Holly's going to go for a lot of body locks, and Holly's probably going to just try to do some, just really try to grab onto her and just drag her down. Sure, she'll be in Mayra's guard, but I don't know if Holly's going to give her separation where Mayra can get her feet on her hips and look for a submission that way. Yeah, Mayra might be able to get up, but even then, Holly's really good at keeping her opponents down. It's just all around a really tough fight for Mayra Bueno Silva. If Bueno Silva, again, she's able to get submissions over Stephanie Egger and Lena Landsberg, that's great and all, But Holly Holm's in a whole other level. Holly Holm's a former world champion. She's fought in main events before. She has seen good fighters. Now, again, Mayra Bueno Silva is a good jiu-jitsu player, but it's nothing that Holly hasn't seen. Like, Holly's going to be aware that Mayra Bueno Silva is going to be fishing for arm bars or looking for a knee bar, too. And then something else to play also in this fight. Okay, Mayra Bueno Silva's been winning fights on the ground. I know she outstruck Wu Yanan in a fight of the night, where she did again lose a round to Wu Yanan in that fight, because Wu Yanan out-wrestled her in the second round. But you can get into great fights on the feet with Wu Yanan. Okay, but then you go to Holly Holm. So I think Holly Holm can win this fight if she just wrestles Mayra Bueno Silva. And I know you're playing the small risk of the grappling and the jiu-jitsu out of Silva, but can we forget about the striking out of Holly Holm? I mean, like, great boxer and kickboxer Holly Holm. That's just tough for Bueno Silva on the feet. Like, if she goes 5 rounds with Holly Holm on the feet, what, are we going to see a Bethe Correia type fight where Holly Holm knocks her out with a head kick? Like, seriously, it's a very tough fight for Mayra Bueno Silva. I think it is. Like, the odds, minus 155 for Holm, I think should be a little bit higher than that. I know, again, people are picking Bueno Silva based on the grappling and the submission skills and the jiu-jitsu. And I know, yes, Holly Holm is 10 years older than Mayra Bueno Silva, and Mayra Bueno Silva is 31 years old. So Holly is old, but this is her last run for potentially the belt. And this is the one fight, I think, keeping her from that next shot at the World Championship. And against probably Juliana Pena in a very close fight. Maybe Holly gets the belt if she gets the Juliana fight. Seriously, we'll see. I think that's a close fight. But I think, we have Holly in terms of striking. I think Holm's able to go out there and outstrike Mayra Bueno Silva. And then if the fight goes to the ground, I think Holly dictates that with her wrestling, because I don't think Myra's got the wrestling. She's got the jiu-jitsu, she's got the grappling, but does she have the wrestling to take Holly down? I don't think so. I think Holly's the one that's able to dictate where the fight ends up. So Myra's just kind of stuck then, because Holly's able to dictate where the fight goes, and Myra's not going to knock out Holly. She's not going to give Holly trouble on the feet. So Holm can just outstrike her, and then on the ground, I think Holly's the more dominant fighter and who can really use her top control to her advantage. So this is all-day Holly Holm for me. I think if the fight stays on the feet for all 5 rounds, maybe you look at a Holly knockout. But again, Holm has not gotten a finish in the UFC since that Bethe Correia win. She's only gotten 2 knockout finishes, or just finishes in general in the UFC. It's the win over Bethe Correia, and then it's the Ronda Rousey win. I don't think this is going to be the third. It's in the Apex. It'll probably be like a sparring fight. Holly Holm by decision. I think it's just all Holly Holm in this one. I don't really see it being competitive. I'm going to go 50-45 Holly Holm. 50-45 Holly Holm. Because again, I just don't know what Mayra is able to do that can really hurt and threaten Holly Holm at all. So when you look at the rankings, again, if Mayra wins, she won't get a title shot because then they'll just do Juliana or Raquel. But if Holly wins, number 1's Juliana, 2's Raquel, 3's Holly, 4 is Ketlen Vieira, which is great because Ketlen Vieira actually did just beat Holly Holm, but Ketlen Vieira just lost to Raquel Pennington, so it's just kind of a triangle then because Holly lost to Ketlen, but Raquel beat Ketlen, but then Holly beat Raquel. Name value then takes into account Holly's a bigger name than Raquel Pennington, Juliana's a bigger name than Raquel Pennington, arguably not a bigger name than Holly Holm, but still, they're going to put the 2 biggest names in the title fight. It'll be Juliana Pena and Holly Holm if Holly beats Mayra Bueno Silva. If Holly loses, it'll be Raquel and Juliana for the championship. So Raquel Pennington's the biggest Holly Holm fan right now, and then for Mayra Bueno Silva, Raquel Pennington's the biggest Mayra Bueno Silva fan because she does not want Holly Holm to get the title fight. But I think Holly's going to win, and Holly Holm will find herself in her 3rd UFC championship bout against Juliana Pena, likely in I would say like November-ish, probably the co-main event in Madison Square Garden, something like that. So, folks, that'll do it for UFC Fight Night. Holly Holm versus Mayra Bueno Silva in the main event. Again, it is a lackluster Fight Night card, but thank y'all for joining me throughout this entire video. Thank y'all for watching, too. Make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for more. We'll be back next week from London, main event. Marcin Tybura, Tom Aspinall from the O2. So make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy the video. If you disagree with any of the picks, make sure to hit that comment section down below as well. And thank y'all for watching, and Mamba forever.